U.S. want Israel to withdraw forces from southern Lebanon?
Well, we want Israel's security to be protected, and we also want Lebanon's sovereignty to be protected, and this is going to be an ongoing conversation.
Our fighters in southern Lebanon have full freedom of action to thwart any direct or emerging threat to them or to the residents of the north.
This is Today as It Happened. Good Monday evening to you. I'm Holly Furfer, here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories from the day. From high-stakes talks between the U.S. and Iran to a key ruling in the case of Tyler Robinson. He's the man accused of killing Charlie Kirk. But first this morning, we took a look at the resignation of UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The British are looking for a new prime minister. Keir Starmer has resigned as leader of the Labour Party. Andy Burnham, who recently won a special parliamentary election, is the front runner to take over. Scripps News international correspondent Stuart Smith live in London for us. And Stuart, first of all, what led to this resignation?
It's been a while in the making. The Keir Starmer Labour administration over the past 2 years has, analysts say, made a number of mistakes. Of course, mistakes that the opposition parties have jumped on, but also people within his own political party have said there have been too many times when the government has tried to make a change and then U-turned months later, changed its mind, which has given it a perception of being unsure about itself and not really knowing what it's doing. But it all came to a head pretty much in May when there were a series of regional and local elections in the UK that the Labour Party did really, really badly in. And the fear was, even though the next general election is 3 years away, that Keir Starmer was going to have no chance at beating the Labour Party's biggest rival, Reform UK. And so on Monday, having thought about it over the weekend and after coming under some pretty significant pressure from senior people within his own party, he was asked to resign. Here he is speaking earlier.
Every decision I've taken has been about putting the country I love first. That is why I will resign as leader of the Labour Party. I have spoken to His Majesty the King this morning to inform him of my decision. I will ask the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party to set out a timetable with nominations opening on the 9th of July and completed by the summer recess. In the case of a contest, this will ensure a new leader is in place before Parliament returns in September.
Now, just to be clear what he's talking about there, he's talking about an internal party vote. He's not talking about a general election where the whole country goes to the polls. This is normal in British politics. It's happened quite often. And it means that effectively Labour lawmakers in the national parliament will be deciding the next prime minister, not people in the country.
And so then what do we know, Stuart, about Andy Burnham? Who is he and where did he come from?
He's been around in politics for quite a long time. He's been a cabinet minister, part of the government twice in his career. He's tried to become Labour leader twice, but most recently he was the mayor of Manchester, the UK's second biggest city, and he was there for 9 years and largely seen as having done a very good job. And he is, according to national polling, the most popular Labour politician in Britain, despite not being in Parliament, but doing his job as Mayor of Manchester. As to what this means if he becomes Prime Minister, which it looks very likely he will do sometime in the next few weeks, well, he's suggested one of his main policies, as well as the usual basics like boosting growth and improving the economy, is something called devolution, giving more powers to local areas and cities to be able to have more say about what they do. He said those powers were very useful when he was Mayor of Manchester. He's looking at potentially changing the way taxes work in the UK, taxing land rather than taxing people. He's looking at maybe a wealth tax, for example, and also making some other cuts. But to be frank, we haven't, as you would expect ahead of a normal election, had the level of detail that you would expect. This has all happened quite quickly, and so we don't know exactly what he will or will not do, and he might need a few weeks and months to sort that out. When it comes to foreign policy, and particularly the United States, he has criticised the current situation in the US as being a poisonous style of politics. He has before criticised Donald Trump, saying that he has brought instability to the world, but he is expected largely to continue being the current foreign policy situation where the UK and the US, despite differences in opinion of the leaders, do tend to work together whenever possible.
A little diplomacy there. Scripps News international correspondent Stuart Smith live for us in London. Thank you, Stuart. Now, why don't we take a look at some of the other top headlines from today? 2 people were killed, 5 others were injured after this twister touched down in Illinois. The state has experienced more than 150 tornadoes so far this year. That's a record, and it's only June. The Midwest could see more severe storms later today, especially in parts of Kansas and Oklahoma. Testosterone therapy may soon come with updated warning labels. The Department of Health and Human Services says the latest evidence no longer supports older warnings about heart risks, prostate cancer, and enlarged prostates. The agency is asking drug makers to update their labels to reflect those new findings. That could make the treatment easier to access, but experts say testosterone therapy is still a medical treatment that should only be used under a doctor's guideline. And New York is exploring a bid to bring the Winter Olympics back to the state. Governor Kathy Hochul announced an exploratory committee Monday to look at a co-hosting plan between Lake Placid and New York City. Lake Placid last hosted the Winter Games in 1980, the year of the famous Miracle on Ice, you might recall. The earliest New York could host would be 2042. The committee will take about a year to complete its work.
Just to be clear, Elmo wants Team USA to win, okay? But Elmo loves everybody. Just to be clear. Don't make this a thing.
Elmo, look at that. He's setting the record straight. He has a favorite in the World Cup. It was after ruffling some feathers among Knicks fans 2 weeks ago after he wished both teams good luck in the NBA Finals. New Yorkers were upset because supposedly Sesame Street is in New York. But Elmo has a clear favorite this time around. By the way, Team USA plays again Thursday against Turkey. Oh, say, can you see? Yep, as an Oklahoma fireworks stand goes up in flames this weekend. According to the Broken Arrow Fire Department, those fireworks were actively detonating when they arrived, and it took about 20 minutes to get everything extinguished. No known cause of the fire so far. Coming up on Today As It Happened.
We laid a very good foundation for a successful final deal. The final deal is the house. We set the foundation. We haven't built the house, but we've laid a successful foundation to get to a good place for the American people.
Glad you're back with us here on Today As It Happened. Let's check back in on our daily briefing of today's top stories.
The Iranians have agreed to invite IAEA inspectors back into their country. That is a major milestone for the American people and the first step in permanently denuclearizing or permanently ending a nuclear weapons program in Iran. And that's exactly what we wanted to do. That's
big news out of a weekend of negotiations with Iran. Iran will allow inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency back into Iran. The vice president calling it the first step in keeping the country from having nuclear weapons. This after a rough start to negotiations after Iran called remarks by President Trump insulting. Both sides reached some agreements, giving them 60 days to work out a broader deal. Washington correspondent Stephanie Liebergen joins us now from Capitol Hill. Steph, so the talks over the weekend, we know Vice President Vance said he's not going to stay there for the entire time, but he kicked things off. Where do they stand now?
Hey, Holly. Well, we heard from the vice president where he kind of laid out a handful of key accomplishments that were made in this first round of high-level talks. Of course, as you mentioned, the VP says can't stay in Switzerland for 60 days, so there will be other people continuing the technical talks, as he called them, going forward. But the accomplishments the vice president laid out in his remarks this morning, he said there is now a process or a communication line for dealing with any issues in the Strait of Hormuz. Over the weekend, Iran claimed to close the strait again, But the U.S. CENTCOM saying as many as 55 ships made it through the strait on a single day, which is effectively what was normal traffic in the Strait of Hormuz. The president said there is also a new process or a mechanism for deconflicting any regional issues. So this is a nod to the continued conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, the Iranian-backed group in Lebanon, where the vice president really said if an attack, if something that maybe threatens the ceasefire crops up, there's a new communication line for de-escalating and to make sure that that conflict doesn't get worse. As you heard in that soundbite from the vice president, international inspectors will be allowed back in Iran for their nuclear-related program, and that conversations related to that process could start as soon as today. And the president said the expectations were laid out for the technical talks that need to continue as we move deeper into this 60-day period. So the vice president really walking away seemingly pretty optimistic, saying that a lot of progress was made in this first weekend, but he said there's still a lot more to do.
We haven't built the house, but we've laid a successful foundation to get to a good place for the American people. I think it's important for all of us to appreciate how much was done, but honestly, there is still a lot to do as we continue to make progress on the nuclear talks, on the economic talks, as we continue to demine the straits and ensure that that flow of traffic continues to pick back up.
The vice president also talked about the potential unfreezing of billions of dollars worth of Iranian assets, something that Iranian officials have said is part of this process and is already underway. But the vice president put a little halt on that and said if, really stressing the if any money in frozen Iranian assets is released, the VP says there is an agreement between the U.S. and Qatar that they'll have approval over those funds and that any released funds will be given to Iran, but then to be reinvested in American agriculture products like wheat, soy, and corn that would then benefit the Iranian people. The key concern, of course, with any of those assets being released, making sure that they do not end up funding terrorism in the region. Holly.
All right, and then, Steph, we talked about, they said maybe 60 days this negotiations will take, maybe not as long, but now what happens next? Walk us through what we can expect to see.
So while the vice president is heading home, technical talks are going to continue all week long, continued in Switzerland. So even when the primary negotiators for the U.S. and Iran aren't there, there is still a lot that is going to happen behind the scenes by lower level negotiators from both governments to try to iron out all of the nitty-gritty details. So technical talks continuing. There's going to be a lot of eyes, I think, this week on the Strait of Hormuz. How many ships are able to make it through? And is that, helping the global energy market get back to a sense of normalcy? There's going to be a lot of attention, I think, this week on Israel and Hezbollah. Do they continue the ceasefire, the new one that was agreed to on Saturday? There was a lull in fighting on Sunday and so far on Monday in that region. Really the longest lull in fighting that conflict has seen since March. So if Saturday's ceasefire is able to hold, that's certainly a good thing for the larger peace talks between the U.S. and Iran. And I think both countries are going to be looking to each other to start ensuring that they're complying with the memorandum of understanding that was signed last week. There is a lot of distrust between the countries involved in this conflict and in these negotiations. So a big part of the process over these next 60 days and potentially beyond, if the ceasefire is extended or if we get a final deal, is going to be compliance. Who follows through on what they've agreed to? And we've heard repeatedly from U.S. officials that a lot of what Iran could get in a potential final deal is going to be contingent upon compliance and making sure they're doing what they've agreed to in terms of their nuclear program, potentially funding other terrorism in the region. So a lot to keep our eyes on this week, Holly, but certainly seems that this first round of high-level talks was successful and certainly optimistic that success might continue as these talks keep going.
We'll take that positivity on a Monday morning. National correspondent Stephanie Libergan live at the Capitol for us. Thank you, Steph. Pope Leo XIV is calling on world leaders to do more to fight hunger. Speaking to the UN World Food Program in Rome today, the Pope said wars are being funded more easily than people are being fed. He urged governments to cut red tape, blocking aid from reaching those in need, and criticized rising military spending as food assistance funding drops sharply. A towering figure in American economic history has died. Alan Greenspan, the longest-serving chairman of the Federal Reserve and a man whose words could move global markets, died Monday morning. From navigating the 1987 stock market crash to presiding over the robust 90s economy and the early 2000s recession, Alan Greenspan's influence reached every corner of America's financial life, spanning the administrations of Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and George W. Bush. In his later years, Greenspan remained active as a writer and consultant, authoring books and offering his insights on the challenges of globalization, markets, and governance. Alan Greenspan was 100 years old. President Trump is blaming vandals for problems with the newly renovated reflecting pool, but has not offered evidence to back that up. One man has been arrested. 67-year-old David Hearn says he simply touched a loose strip of paint during a bike ride and then was taken into custody. Trump had ordered the pool renovated to clear out algae that has plagued it for more than 100 years, but the algae has returned. We'll be right back with more of today's top news right here on Today's It Happened. Thanks for staying with us here on Today's It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer with your daily look at the day's biggest stories. Extreme heat and dry, windy conditions are fueling wildfires across the West. In Utah, an uncontained blaze southwest of Salt Lake City forced an entire town to evacuate. Firefighters are battling the fires as dangerous conditions continue to spread across the region. Scripps News Group reporter Darian DeBrule joins us live from Salt Lake City, where another fire has encroached all the way to the university. And Darian, what can you tell us about the conditions there on the ground right now this morning?
Well, we got an update from fire officials about an hour ago, and they told us the containment on this fire, the Bonneville fire area, is about at 5%, acreage just under 500. But what we can tell you is you can see the burn scar, the dark part of that. That is how close it got to the hospital at the University of Utah. There are no longer active flames on this side of the mountain, and fire crews are really fighting back there in an area called Snake Gulch, where they are battling some steep and rocky terrain, as the rattlesnake name might suggest. Did decrease in temperatures as well as humidity in the air allowed crews to really attack that fire, get it under control. But they are expecting some hot temperatures today, and they are expecting fire activity to pick up in this fire, the Bonneville fire, and across the state. As you mentioned, we have the Iron Fire burning in Eureka, which is over 20,000 acres and led to the evacuations of thousands. So while they are trying to do their best to grasp all of these fires happening in the area, the weather here is not making it too easy.
And Darian, are they expecting rain in the forecast, or is this something that every day is going to be another battle?
This weekend, we are expecting temperatures to cool, at least up here in the Salt Lake area. I think we're going to get into the 80s on Sunday, maybe even the mid 70s, which would really help fire conditions. But as of right now, for these next few days, they are expecting temperatures to stay high in the 90s. And like I said, they are expecting these fires to remain active and for the temperatures to contribute to hopefully not growth, but to an increase in fire activity.
All right, Scripps News Group reporter Darian DeBrule, thank you for the update. We appreciate it. Confirmed Ebola cases in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo have now topped 1,000, with at least 254 deaths. The outbreak caused by a rare strain of Ebola with no vaccine treatment available. Violence in the region is reportedly making it harder to trace contacts and contain that virus. The UN warns displaced communities are at high risk as the disease continues to spread. It's not just algae and peeling paint plaguing the reflecting pool in Washington. Now Scripps News is learning a donor to President Trump's campaign won a no-bid contract to help fix that project. Green Water Services will get $1.7 million to install a new filtration system. The Interior Department says the project was urgent and needs to be finished before the nation's 250th birthday celebrations. Another contractor, Atlantic Industrial Coatings, got a $14 million contract to work on the pool. Both companies say the president had no role in awarding the jobs. It has the potential to be one of the biggest sports comebacks in recent history. Serena Williams will make her singles return at Wimbledon next week. Now, she's not played a singles match since 2022. With 23 Grand Slam singles titles to her name, Serena says she's got nothing to lose. Wyndham Clark has won the U.S. Open. He fought off a late surge from Sam Burns, originally leading by 6 shots on Sunday before finishing with a one-stroke victory. He led the tournament wire to wire. This is his second U.S. Open title. And the win came on Father's Day, with his dad surprising him on the course after he sunk his last putt to take home the title. Woody, king of the box office this weekend. Toy Story 5 bringing in $160 million in North America and more than $300 million globally. That's the biggest movie opening of the year, and it's the second biggest ever for an animated film. Steven Spielberg's alien thriller Disclosure Day was second, bringing in $17 million this weekend. Here's what's coming up on Today As It Happened.
The accused shooter in the Charlie Kirk murder was present during a WebEx hearing today. I'm senior national investigative correspondent Lori Jane Gliha. Ahead, what the judge ruled on today that will affect an upcoming preliminary hearing.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. This is Scripps News end-of-day snapshot of the biggest stories you might have missed. So let's pick up right where we left off.
A federal judge has ruled that audio recordings of former President Joe Biden can be released to the public. The recordings come from conversations Biden had while working on a memoir about the death of his son, Beau. A Trump-appointed judge ruled the Justice Department must hand over the tapes over to the conservative Heritage Foundation under the Freedom of Information Act. The foundation argued that the recordings should be public because they were part of a government review into how Biden handled classified information. Biden's legal team is appealing. The Trump administration investigation into Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and other state officials was meant to harass and retaliate against them. That's according to a federal judge who said it is the reason why he is blocking the Justice Department subpoenas. U.S. District Judge Patrick Schlitz says the dominant purpose was to coerce officials into helping the federal government enforce civil immigration law, while celebrating that ruling, calling it a victory for our democracy. The Supreme Court has reinstated the murder conviction of the man found guilty in the 1979 disappearance of 6-year-old Eitan Pates. In a 6-3 ruling, the High Court said the appeals court overstepped its authority by throwing out Pedro Hernandez's conviction. Hernandez is serving 25 years to life in prison. Eitan's disappearance helped launch National Missing Children's Day. And Grammy-winning music executive Clive Davis has died at the age of 94. Davis helped shape the careers of multiple generations of artists, including Janis Joplin, Bruce Springsteen, and Whitney Houston. He's also a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. A representative for Davis says he died in his Manhattan home. He was recently being hospitalized with an upper respiratory infection. And the accused Charlie Kirk shooter Tyler Robinson faced a judge again today, this time in a WebEx hearing. The judge making multiple key rulings that will affect an upcoming preliminary hearing. This hearing is a significant part of the court process that will determine if the case can proceed to trial. Senior national investigative correspondent Lori Jane Gliha has been following the proceedings. So, Lori Jane, seems like the judge denied several requests that the defense was asking for. What can you tell us?
Right, Andrew. Well, the judge denied a request to have the accused shooter's roommate at the time of the shooting attend an upcoming preliminary hearing and be available for cross-examination in the courtroom then. Again, this is for the upcoming preliminary hearing. It is not for the actual trial, but it's a time when evidence is laid out to see if there is enough to proceed to that trial. Now, court filings suggest that prosecutors do plan to share some of the things that the roommate said under oath in a recorded statement, as well as text messages between between that roommate and the suspect that were about the shooting, including an alleged confession from the accused suspect. Now, the defense was asking for this witness to be present for cross-examination in the upcoming preliminary hearing, but the judge denied that. And there are two other important issues that we're waiting on for a ruling. There's been an ongoing fight, as you know, about whether cameras should be allowed in the courtroom. The judge did not make a ruling on that yet, but we've seen cameras allowed all along so far. He did, however, say that no electronics like watches or glasses or cell phones or laptops would be allowed in, though that does not apply to the attorneys who are already involved in this case. And the third thing that we're waiting on, Andrew, is whether or not the prosecution team should be reprimanded or sanctioned for speaking to some media outlets after the defense revealed in filings that at least one initial law enforcement ballistics test seemed inconclusive when tracing bullet fragments from the bullet that killed Charlie Kirk back to the gun that the suspect was accused of using. Now, this is important because the defense team is also trying to say that the death penalty should be taken off the table because the comments that were made publicly could influence a jury. Of course, the argument on the other side of that is that the jury has not yet been selected, and there are, of course, a number of ways, Andrew, that jurors could be vetted, and this was not decided today. Andrew?
Okay, and so LJ, what happens next for Tyler Robinson?
Sure. Well, there is another hearing that is scheduled for later this week, and as of now, that significant preliminary hearing is scheduled for early July. Andrew?
All right, our senior national investigative correspondent, Lori Jane Gliha. LJ, thank you. And a California sheriff's deputy has been charged with manslaughter in connection with a deadly car crash last September. The 42-year-old deputy is accused of speeding through a red light and slamming into a young couple's car. A 21-year-old was killed in that crash. His fiancée was left with severe life-altering injuries. An investigation found the deputy was responding to a shots fired call, even though dispatchers had apparently confirmed there were already deputies on the scene. He's charged with gross vehicular manslaughter and felony reckless driving, causing serious injury. The deputy is also on administrative leave. If convicted, he faces up to 14 years in prison. And tensions are high in Mississippi after police opened fire on a moving vehicle and shot and killed a 1-year-old boy last Sunday. Furthering the outrage, this stemmed from an alleged shoplifting case at a Walmart. Police say the suspect was behind the wheel and accelerating towards them when one of the officers fired that fatal shot. Scripps News senior national correspondent Jay Gray is looking into this case. So Jay, when you see this picture of this 1-year-old, you can't help but wonder how something like this could have happened. I understand the family is calling for an independent autopsy. Can you tell us why?
Yeah, Andrew, the family's attorneys say they're just concerned overall with the transparency of this investigation, say they are worried about how it is going to be carried out. And they also are saying that the mother of the young boy, she's disputing a police account of how he was killed.
Justice for baby Cohen! Justice for baby Cohen!
Calls for justice just days after 1-year-old Cohen Wiley was shot and killed by police responding to a shoplifting call in northwest Mississippi. This video showing the scene playing out in a Walmart parking lot in the small town of Senatobia.
They were called over a box of diapers, and a family now has to bury their baby. You cannot put those two things next to each other and call it reasonable policing.
An officer firing shots into a car he alleges was accelerating toward him, something Cohen's mother, a passenger in the vehicle, denies. Valencia Wiley also says she held Cohen up so officers would know there was a baby in the car just before the shots were fired.
I watched my baby take his first breath, and I watched my baby take his last breath.
The officer who fired the shots has been placed on administrative leave. The Mississippi Bureau of Investigation promising transparency as they gather evidence, including security and police body cam video of the incident. The MBI promising to release that video, but only after the investigation is complete.
We don't have to wait 6 to 9 months. They can release the body cam footage of the officers. The officers have body cams on. We know if their lives were in danger because we can tell from the body cam footage.
Attorneys for Wiley's family have requested an independent autopsy. There will be a public funeral for Cohen, which could come as early as the weekend. Now, a couple of other quick points in this case. The driver of the car was critically injured during that shooting. Her injuries, though, not considered life-threatening. Also, Cohen's mother has not been accused or charged with shoplifting following the incident. So a lot to sort out here, obviously, Andrew.
And Jay, this is a small town, and it is one that is familiar with tension between the community and police. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, community advocates telling us that the death of Cohen is really a, quote, breaking point after multiple incidents in the city across the span of the last several years, including an officer threatening a black woman with a taser, then pulling her from her car to the ground after a confrontation over a handicapped parking spot. And that happened, Andrew, in the same Walmart parking lot where this shooting occurred.
Wow. Senior national correspondent Jay Gray. Jay, thank you for your reporting.
Just ahead, right here on Today's It Happened.
As the controversies over the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool project continue, President Donald Trump is now suggesting the algae growth and torn lining are the result of alleged vandalism. More on that coming up soon.
You're watching Today as It Happened, Scripps News rundown of the biggest events and stories of the day. So let's dive right back in.
President Trump is blaming vandals for problems with the newly renovated reflecting pool, but no evidence so far yet offered up. Trump had ordered that pool renovated to clear out algae that has plagued it for more than 100 years, but that algae has returned, and the reflecting pool has become a new focal point for how the president is looking to change Washington, D.C. Scripps News White House correspondent Jacob Gardenschwartz joins us now with the latest. He is there at the reflecting pool. So, Jacob, what can you tell us about that alleged vandalism the president mentioned and subsequent arrests?
Well, Andrew, the president posting over the weekend and into today, as you noted, deflecting blame for those problems we've seen with the renovation, both the burgeoning algae as well as the sharing of the, as well as the peeling paint. But rather than, suggesting that the renovation process had anything to do with those issues, the president suggested that it was alleged vandals. Now, an administration source telling Scripps News that there have been 5 arrests associated with that alleged vandalism, as well as 5 additional citations for a total of 14 police reports filed, though officials have not been willing to share any sort of documentation or charging documents associated with those alleged crimes. A second law enforcement source tells us that there were a handful of citations handed out, and they're still sorting through how exactly to address this. Of course, this comes on the heels of weeks now of controversy surrounding this renovation project that took place on a rapid pace, handing out no-bid contracts to contractors with reported ties to the president. Now, we've spoken to a number of officials here today, some law enforcement officials who are, not wanting to speak on the record. You can see here behind me National Guard and Park Police surveilling. We have not seen any sort of incidents with them. There's also a good amount of tourists and locals who are out here trying to see for themselves what is going on. We asked them about the president's allegation of vandalism. Here's what one person had to tell us.
Just pointing fingers in that somebody's doing nefarious things to make this happen. I'm sorry, it's the climate. It's just, ill-advised, techniques and things. And it's hard for folks that don't live in this area. This is my backyard.
And at least one of those individuals who is said to face charges is vehemently disputing that he did anything wrong. A 3-time Olympian says that he was here, he saw a piece of that paint peeling up, stuck his hand in to touch it to sort of investigate for himself, but denies any intentional wrongdoing as a means of impacting the coating. Again, we have asked officials repeatedly for any sort of evidence documenting the president's claims that officials have been dumping chemicals into the pool or slashing the coating. At this point, no evidence provided for what the president has said. Andrew.
Yeah, and Jacob, this obviously has taken up a lot of the president's bandwidth. He's been writing about it on True Social. It seems like it's a major focus for him. Any idea exactly why this is such a focal point for the commander-in-chief?
Well, according to the president's critics, this really represents a number of the problems with the president's approach to things. Rather than going through the typical process, which involves months of contracting, permitting reviews, soliciting multiple bids, the president said he wanted this done expeditiously. The Trump administration cited regulations that allowed them to do so on an urgent basis, and according to some, they rushed this process. As a result, now, of course, you have all of the controversies that we've seen, and both the president and the contracting company that installed this coating acknowledge the pool is likely going to have to be drained again. We got a statement from Atlantic Industrial Coatings, that's the company that received that $14.7 million no-bid contract to install the pool coating in American flag blue. They acknowledged what they said, very small parts of the massive 7-acre project have issues that, quote, do not indicate the failure of the liner. They said repairs cannot be made until the pool is drained, and that will happen as soon as it is feasible for the park. So we will certainly be watching to see when that begins. Meanwhile, earlier today, we saw some officials with some sort of federal agency, wasn't entirely clear which one, though they were being protected by National Guard, sampling the water, taking a long stick connected to a cup, scooping up some of that mucky material that you can see right here behind me as the ducks are swimming around in it, and taking it off for further sampling. Again, we tried to get some clarity from them as to what exactly they were doing. They would not answer our questions. We independently received the results of some sampling from an independent researcher at George Mason University last week. She said that at that point, this was last Tuesday, almost a week ago now, there was no indication that any of the algae was dangerous, just a bit of an eyesore, though officials have said that as this problem continues, it could lead to the development of more dangerous bacteria. Perhaps that's what these officials were sampling for. Again, we've asked, have not been told what exactly they were doing. Andrew.
Yeah, and Jacob, I know you've been down there the past few days. How's it looking today? Any improvements? Is it green, blue, something in between?
Yeah, I've really been studying up on my synonyms for blue, green, aquamarine, teal. I would say today it is a little bit more blue than it was when I was here at the end of last week. One reason experts have told us is because as a result of some of the hydrogen peroxide and ozone that they've been pumping into the pool, a lot of the algae that was floating at the surface has died and sort of sunk to the bottom. And so as a result, the top of the pool is actually much cleaner than it was, though if you look at all close, you can see a good bit of that, green mucky buildup on the bottom. Andrew?
Yes, some of those images look like the Chicago River on St. Patrick's Day. Glad to hear there are at least some, perhaps, improvements being made. Our White House correspondent Jacob Gardenschwartz for us. Jacob, thank you.
Straight ahead on Today as It Happened.
Two things. We have an open strait, and we have a country that will never have a nuclear weapon. Will never, ever have a nuclear weapon.
Welcome back to Today as It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. All right, why don't we get right back to our rundown of the top stories of the day.
A massive fire at a hotel in the Dominican Republic has left nearly 1,700 tourists stranded after many reported losing passports and travel documents in the blaze. With passports destroyed, many tourists are now stuck awaiting emergency assistance as the investigation into the cause of the fire continues. That fire broke out Friday and spread rapidly through the resort, forcing an emergency evacuation. Authorities say at least one person, an Italian reality TV star, was killed. 3 others were hospitalized and several others treated on site. And the delicate negotiations with Iran are making progress. That's according to Vice President JD Vance. He says Iran agreed to allow the International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors back in the country. But the New York Times reporting Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson said the country made no such promises.
If Iran doesn't live up to their agreement, or if they're not behaving, I will do what I have to do.
Does that give them leverage over you, Mr. President?
Say it?
Does that give them leverage, the Iranians leverage over you?
Oh, you're so leverage. Their Navy is gone.
So Scripps News senior White House correspondent Haley Bull joins me now. So Haley, moments ago, we heard the president say that he thought VP Vance did a fantastic job in the talks. What else do we know right now?
Well, Andrew, both sides are touting progress as President Trump at the same time is warning Iran if they don't live up to the agreement, he says. Now, Vice President Vance said the talks over this weekend into this morning laid what he called a, quote, good foundation, but he was also very clear that there is more work to do ahead. Mediators say the parties agreed on what they called a roadmap to a final agreement in this 60-day negotiating period. They also focused on deconfliction paths for both the Strait of Hormuz and Lebanon. But there are potentially thorny issues ahead, one being Iran's nuclear program. There were discussions on elements of a deal, according to a senior U.S. diplomat. Nuclear deal. The vice president says Iran agreed to invite nuclear inspectors into the country, though Iranian officials have not confirmed that publicly, and some Iranian state media have pushed back against it. The U.S. has called for and remained steadfast in calling for the destruction of Iran's highly enriched uranium. As recently as this weekend, Iran's president reiterated that it does not want to do that, essentially. Now, the Iranians, for their part, have heavily focused on the unfreezing of Iranian assets and lifting of sanctions. President Trump today is saying any unfrozen Iranian funds will be put towards purchasing American agriculture. The vice president saying the U.S. and Qatar will oversee the process, but still reiterating that any unfrozen funds is something that would only come with any progress they see from the Iranians in reaching the elements laid out in negotiations. Meanwhile, while these high-level talks in Switzerland have wrapped, technical teams are remaining to continue those discussions, and we understand on the U.S. side that includes folks from state, energy, the Pentagon, to name a few, Andrew.
Yeah, and the other X factor here seems to be Lebanon. No deal, it seems like, that Iran would agree to without Israel and Hezbollah fighting ceasing. Any progress on that end?
That is a key part of this, and something people are watching as these negotiations move forward to see if the ceasefire holds in Lebanon. This is where Israel has been carrying out operations against Hezbollah, and at times it had threatened progress in negotiations ahead of reaching the memorandum of understanding. A ceasefire there is part of that memorandum of understanding and been a key focus for the Iranians in particular. As we are seeing officials say that part of the focus of these weekend talks was establishing a deconfliction mechanism in Lebanon. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is also holding steadfast in keeping troops in southern Lebanon over those concerns from Hezbollah. We also understand, according to a U.S. official, as we are seeing the efforts to maintain this ceasefire, Secretary Rubio spoke with both Prime Minister Netanyahu as well as Lebanon's president on Friday about solidifying the ceasefire and future talks. Lebanon and Israel expected to have another round of discussions in Washington. Additionally, a U.S. official saying because of the calls with Rubio today, the U.S. is starting what they call a monitoring mechanism routed through U.S. Central Command, so there is information about fighting in Lebanon.
Thank you for spending some of your evening with us here on Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. Have a striking Monday night.